You're listening to the Heart Lessons podcast with me, Sarah Rieke. Real women, real stories, real faith. Hi, friends, and thanks for tuning in to episode 30 of the Heart Lessons podcast. I cannot believe we're at 30 episodes. That's kind of crazy. But very cool. And I like I said last week, I've been so privileged just to be able to connect with these women and share their stories. And I'm just so thrilled to be able to introduce all of them to you guys. And hopefully you're learning something each week, and hopefully it's blessing your life as much as it's blessing mine. This week, I have another amazing guest. Her name is Emily Chapman Richards, and she is the oldest daughter of singer-songwriter Steven Curtis Chapman and best-selling author Mary Beth Chapman. And so Emily and I talk a little bit about what it was like growing up in her house with her dad, being who he was. We talk about her passion for orphan care and adoption, which started when she was really young. We talk about what it was like to tragically lose her youngest sister just a few months before she got married. And we talk about her life overseas. She lived in Ireland for a while. We chat about the adjustments that and shock to our systems that becoming a mom for the first time was. And then also just what it's like to be a mom now, and our hopes and our dreams for our children. And also Emily shares her big hopes and dreams that she has for Jesus. I think you're going to love my conversation with Emily. She is so fun to listen to. She was so fun to chat with. And so here's my conversation with her. Thank you to everyone who's tuning in to the Heart Lessons podcast today. As you know, I like to find women who are walking well in what God has for them. And today I have with me Emily Chapman Richards. So hi, Emily. Thanks for joining me this afternoon.
Thank you, Sarah. It's a joy to be with you.
So will you tell everybody a little bit about who you are, what you do these days, a little bit of your family, who's in your family, and, just a snapshot of your everyday life?
Yes, so Emily Chapman Richards. I live in Franklin, Tennessee, which is just south of Nashville. I am the wife to Tanner Richards, who is a gymnastics coach, which is fun. I'm the least coordinated person you might ever meet, and I married a gymnast, which is funny and ironic. We've got 3 beautiful daughters. Eiley is nearly 5. She'll be 5 very soon. Della is 2, and our baby Verity is 1. So we're quite busy, and I'm working part-time, so that also keeps the schedule pretty full. So yeah, just lots going on.
Yeah, so you're definitely in those mothering in the trenches phase.
Oh my goodness, yes.
Very hands-on. Yes. Yeah, that's great. So I would love to know what it was like growing up with your dad being who he is. And for those listeners who maybe haven't connected the dots yet, your dad is Steven Curtis Chapman, singer-songwriter. So what was it like growing up in your home?
So fun.
Right.
It was great. I'm the oldest of 6 kids. So it was quite, always busy. I've got 2 biological brothers, and then there was about a 9-year gap. And then my parents adopted 3 little girls from China. And so, always lots going on, and just so much fun. My parents were crazy intentional parents, which I'm so thankful for. But I never really knew. It's funny when I get asked this question, because I didn't, putting the dots together, like you just said, I kind of didn't put the dots together until I got a little bit older, and realized, people always say, what's it like hearing your dad on the radio? And I never knew any different, because my dad had started his singer-songwriter career right around the time that I was born, a little bit beforehand. So as I started growing up, hearing him on the radio, became kind of exciting, but what we also kind of came to expect. Our dad's doing an interview on the radio, let's listen in, getting to go to concerts and on tour and ride the bus was all something that was so fun and exciting. So it was great. It was a blast growing up with dad in the public life. It definitely had its hard parts, right? Like your family, it's this interesting, it's like this interesting loneliness in a weird way, which seems so kind of counterintuitive when you're like a public family, but you feel known by everyone, or at least you perceive being known by everyone, but you feel like, but do people really know me, you know, and really want to know me for who I am, and not because of maybe who my parents are or connections we have to whatever, what have you, you know, tickets to a show or something like that, you know, so you start wrestling with that as you come into your teenage and young adult years and just kind of wondering, I think all the typical questions you have when you're maybe more public of a family, and I don't even mean that by like celebrity, you know, just people that are in public ministry or, you know, whatever. So, you know, definitely started having those questions. My dad obviously had to travel a lot when we were kids, which I didn't think anything of when we were younger, but I think as I got older, just, you know, some of the sadness of where, you know, he wasn't able to be there, but also, and I would say more so than the sadness, a really deep appreciation for how intentional both my parents were to be present when they could be. My dad, I mean, I could fill up our whole time telling stories of the ways that he would, I mean, I have multiple memories of him playing a show in California, taking a red-eye jet home through the night so that he could be at, you know, a basketball game of mine or a soccer game of my brother's at 8 a.m. on a Saturday, and then he'd fly out at 2 p.m. for a show somewhere else on Saturday night, you know, and he's tired and it's hard and it's stressful and running everywhere, but there was a commitment that I haven't seen mirrored in a lot of other, you know, relationships, to really be as intentionally present as possible with the career that he chose. And it did demand a lot of traveling, but he really did. He continues to try, obviously, to be present at his grandchildren's stuff. And my sisters are still 14 and 16. So 14 and 17. So he's still traveling back for their cheer competitions and what have you. So, it was certainly an interesting upbringing, you know, in the sense of being so public, but I wouldn't change it. You know, it was I think my parents really did a great job balancing, just the career and family life. And, you know, for my parents, actually an interesting conversation I recently had with my mom, you know, it was very much so, my dad's career has always been ministry and something that they chose early on in marriage. My dad has always felt very called to share the gospel through music. And that, you know, that demands something of a family when you step into really, you know, being on the front lines of ministry, and that brings with it some pain and hardship and everything that you know and I know to be true. When we decide to step into the river that God calls us to step into, there's always going to be rocks under the surface that you didn't foresee being there. But it's always, you know, it was always very much so ministry focused for my parents. And I can remember being a kid and sad, where's Dad? Why isn't he here tonight? I miss him. And, you know, just over and over, my mom saying, you know, yeah, I miss Dad too, but, you know, God has called us, you know, as a family to be ministers of his word. And Dad does that by, you know, traveling and singing, and that costs something for all of us, but, you know, we're in this together, you know.
Yeah, what a great testimony. Like, just, yeah, that's so good. And that your mom, when she could very well have said, you know, I miss him too, this is kind of the pits, but she chose to, like, lift him up and, you know, point your eyes towards Jesus. That's awesome. What a great testimony.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I'm so thankful now, particularly now becoming a mom, and, you know, my husband coaches, and so he's not on the road traveling, but coaching hours, as you well know as a mom, are all in the afternoon and evening.
Right.
And so after school. And so for a wife of a coach, that can be hard, because every dinner and bath time and bedtime, for the most part, I'm by myself doing that. And I go, oh my goodness, how did my mom do this year after year? And with really, I mean, obviously there were hard season and hard days, but she really I'm learning even more as a mom went out of her way to really honor my dad and remember our calling as a family. And she's always been with him in it,
Yeah.
Which I really appreciate.
Yeah, that's great. That is the definition of an honoring wife for sure. Yeah,
Definitely.
that's wonderful. So I am actually currently reading your mom's book, which it just is a coincidence that we were also able to connect this way at the same time. But she talked about how influential you were in the adoption of your first sister, which I do not want to mispronounce her name. Is it Shoei?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
correct.
I was trying really hard to figure it out the right way.
Yes.
So you had a passion for orphan care and adoption from a really young age. Where did that come from?
So, yeah, it started when I was like 11.
Yeah.
My mom and I had the opportunity to travel with our church to Haiti with Compassion International.
Okay.
And at the time, we were sponsoring a girl in Haiti. And so we went to Haiti to meet her. And the whole trip actually ended up being kind of a crazy trip because while we were there, in a really weird kind of stream of events, the vice president of Haiti had been shot. I think it was like an attempted assassination. Oh. And the whole country like literally ended up in like uproar and there were like riots. It was really crazy. And I didn't realize, I don't think I realized kind of really how volatile it was because I was 11. I think my mom was obviously trying to
protect
protect me from how crazy it was. But all I knew was I was really impacted by this trip, even as kind of out of control it felt at times, and came home from that trip. I was 11 when I went, so I was meeting kids my own age who didn't have mothers and fathers to go home to, who were at school, but then would go home to a children's home or whatever. And I'm trying in my brain at 11 to sort of reconcile, like, how do you do life without a mom and a dad and a house and food provided for you? And we were on that trip with some friends from Franklin who were in the process of adopting domestically. And so when I came home, I sort of started talking to my parents, like, what if we became missionaries and moved to Haiti? And, kind of this, like,
you're dreaming.
Rambo mode, just like, I'm going to go for it. And my parents like, well, it doesn't really work with Dad's career for us to move to Haiti. Like, that's not quite, going to work. And so with the influence of these good friends that had been with us on the trip, I'm like, well, they're adopting. What if we, started praying about adoption? And my mom immediately just was really kind of terrified at the idea on it. I mean, honestly, and she writes about it in the book, just this idea of like, how could I love a child, that I didn't birth the same way as my biological children, and just wrestling with that honestly, in her own heart. And, my dad's career was picking up and just, we were busy and he's traveling a lot and all those kind of, normal things that you would just sort of, it's not going to work for us, kind of thing.
Yeah. And
so she pretty much dismissed it right off the bat. My dad always was like, yeah, that could be something we, would consider, but your mom's got to be on board sort of deal. So at 11, I really started just praying that, if it was something God would have for us, that he would, change my parents, my mom specifically, her heart toward it. And it's funny, like I'm 30 now, almost 31, and I keep like, God, can my prayer life be how it was when I was 11?
Right.
How was I so convinced of something? And I just prayed really like I just was very consistent and very passionate. And it's so interesting. I'm like, wow, I was at such a young age, just that whole faith of a child, and trying to access that at 30, and just being that convinced. I don't know, that's a musing of my mind. Like, I don't know. Yeah. It was crazy. But I felt there was definitely something of the Lord in it, because I felt very convinced that it was something God had for us. And so I think that largely inspired kind of this commitment to keep praying that God would change my mom's heart. And kind of through what some people would call coincidence, but I call God things, started happening. And found my dad and I were invited to a local adoption agency to a fundraiser about 2.5 years later. And my mom couldn't go because my brothers had a baseball game that she wasn't going to miss.
Right.
Right. So she said, okay, Emily, you can go in my stead. Bring me back all the pamphlets you want, all the material on adoption you want. I'll read every single thing you bring me, but that's it. After this, we're not talking about this anymore. It's been 2 years. I've told you no. And it's the conversation's done. Maybe that's what God has for you someday when you build a family, but we're not going to do it. Mm-hmm. And I said, okay, you have yourself a deal. So I went to this fundraiser and I just brought home it was a huge stack of paper.
I was going to say, how full were your arms? How full were your arms with books and pamphlets then?
Oh, it's so full. I even had like a teddy bear or something, like everything they had, like, give it all to me.
That's great.
You never know what God might use. And it was really that my mom, it led to a conversation between her and my dad and a phone call to the agency, and through a crazy series of events, some laws had been changed in China very recently that afforded our family the opportunity to adopt, because historically for a long time, if you had more than 2 children, there were a lot of restrictions on adopting from China, and all this, it was just crazy, and all these restrictions had been lifted and a month prior to my parents calling and just all this stuff. And so it sort of felt like my mom went, okay, maybe we should pray about this.
Yeah.
And from there, I'll never forget, they sat us all down. So this was I went to Haiti in 1997. This would have been 1999. They sat us down and said, all right, guys, through a series of prayers and just some things that have happened, we feel like God's called us on the road called adoption. But at any point, the road could end, and we're just going to step on the road and start walking. But we don't think this will end up in adoption, but we're willing for it to end up there. But we just don't think, we don't know. It was totally, they were modeling faith for me, and because they weren't, I think something I so appreciate, and I try to tell my parents this as much as I can, their vulnerability, even within their deep trust in God and deep commitment to following His ways and the faith that they do have, the ability to be honest with us gave us space as kids. And we didn't even know what was going to come, years later with the tragic death of my sister. Yeah. Even in these little things, they kept offering us an example of that tension in life of faith and just dealing with the hard of the human story, this is hard. And they kept giving us these little examples. And I'm really thankful for their vulnerability in that, because it set me up for a really hard time later in life to know that it's okay to hold both these in tension, and really there's actually a lot of beauty in life there. You start reading the Psalms. I think David lived there, what's going on? I trust you, but this is crazy. Okay, I trust you. I'm just going to tell my heart I trust you, that kind of thing. So that was really how the adoption all started. And a year and a half later, at that time, adoptions were processing very quickly out of China. We found ourselves all together in a hotel room in the Hunan province of China, receiving Shoei into our family. So just only something God could do.
Yeah. What did that feel like for you, just having this, I guess, kind of dream come to fruition were you 13 by that point, I guess? What was that like for you?
Oh, so exciting. Yeah. Obviously, I still am friends with some of my friends from middle school in that time, when I can remember you running through the hall with Joey's picture and saying, we're going to go, we're going to get her in a month or 2 months or whatever. And, so exciting. But it really did, Sarah, feel like God allowed me to just be a part of something, just like peek into something that He wanted to do. And that felt really like holy, in a sense of like weighty in a good way. Like, wow, I just got to peek into something that He totally did. Yeah. Because, I prayed and He used my prayers, or, however that all works, I don't know. But God really radically changed my mom's heart and my dad, and brought them to this place of faith to say, okay, we're open to adoption. And even, moments before, we're talking minutes before we were in the hotel room, my mom sat all of us kids down and said, guys, I don't know what's about to happen. She was so nervous. She just didn't know. She was so willing and proceeding in faith, but she was just so nervous. Like, what is this going to be like? I've never met this child. And, you know, what, I don't know, but I'm here and I believe God brought us here. And the moment they put Shoei in my mom's arms, I mean, I watched it happen. The floodgates opened and it was as if no time had passed that Shoei had been in our family. You know, in that moment we would have all taken a bullet for her, you know, like this is one of ours. This is our, you know, one of our family members. And to watch that unfold and then to start going, okay, God talks about welcoming us into his family, that we've received spirit of adoption, and like this is how God sees us. Like in an instant, everything changes, and not because of anything we've done, but because of everything Jesus has done. Like, this is incredible. Like, what? You know, and I mean, Shoei couldn't be more a Chapman. It's so fun to see her in our family, and just, I mean, she's obviously her own personality, and but she's like, you know, I can remember as calling home from college, and she'd answer the phone, and I just launch into, hey mom, blah blah blah, and she's like, this isn't mom, this is Shoei. I'm like, you sound just like her. Put her on the phone. Funny. You know, just all those things. And I mean, I cannot imagine my life without him. I can't. You know, it's just it's beautiful. I'm so proud of my parents for trusting that little voice in their hearts, and for how my sisters have, you know, embraced their own stories, because as you, I'm sure, know, they have their own questions, obviously. In being adopted, they were both abandoned, and what does that mean? And just all of those pieces of their story and in their heart that they hold together, you know, they've been on their own journey, but they know, and we know, that God certainly brought us together, and I'm so thankful for them. Very thankful.
That's really beautiful, and a really awesome thing to experience as a young teenager. Like, I'm sure that just to get like a peek into the weight of eternity, like here on earth, and what our lives really mean here. That's something not every 13-year-old gets to experience. Yeah, so
no, certainly. Awesome. And what was interesting, I think this is in Mom's book. It's in my dad's book, which is coming out in the spring, actually. I think like March 2017. When it came time for my parents started talking about adopting Maria, which I was 18 actually at the time. So we adopted Shoei first in 2000, Stevie Joy in 2003, and Maria in 2004. And I was not on board. And I was a senior in high school, and I think obviously I was a wee bit selfish in the sense of like, hey, this is supposed to be like my year to get the attention. Like, I'm leaving for college. And there was some practicality to it. Like, I was about to go off to college, and up until that point, you know, I had really been kind of my mom's right-hand man, helping with the girls. I could drive, you know, so I'd pick them up from preschool, after school, all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, my dad was about to go on a, you know, nationwide tour, and I'm like, really, you're going on tour and another kid, and I'm going to college? Like, this is crazy. But to just watch God work in my own heart to bring me around to like, okay, Mom and Dad, if you feel like God is calling you to this, I do not want to stand in the way of that. And I'm, you know, Scripture is clear. I'm to honor my mother and father. And if this is something God's calling you to, then I honor that, you know, in you guys, and I can get on board and get excited, you know. And of course, you know, they when they traveled to get her, I was so excited and so on board, and just really bummed that I had to move off to college, you know, shortly after she came home. But as God saw fit, I actually graduated. I don't even really know how. I graduated college a semester early. So I moved home in December prior to the accident in May. Okay. And so I got like 4 months with her here before she passed away. Had I graduated in May, it would have only been like a week or two, you know? Yeah. So God is so sovereign in all of that, those little details, you know? Yeah.
Well, speaking of the accident, which I said to you before we started, I want to tread lightly, because I know what it's like to lose somebody, and it's just, the details are just sacred and precious. And so I definitely want to tread lightly, like I said. But Maria passed away tragically around the same time when you were planning your wedding. Mm-hmm. And so what was that like for you to have a season of mourning just mixed, like basically at the same time as a season of rejoicing? Like, how did you reconcile that and handle that?
Well, looking back 8 years later, I probably didn't handle it the best, but you don't often do in those early months of, being numb and kind of the shock of the loss. So Tanner and I got engaged on May 17th, and Maria passed away on May 21st. So it was pretty whiplash. I did see Maria. So we got engaged. We were out of town at a friend's wedding in Colorado. Got engaged on the airplane, which is a whole nother story, like in the air.
That's great.
Anyway, so we came home. I saw Maria on that Sunday, and it was so interesting. She was so interested in, did you say yes, Emily? Did you say yes? She wanted to know if I said yes to the proposal. I said, yes, Maria. I said, yes, of course I said yes. I love Tanner. I'm so excited to marry him. And then I actually bought my wedding dress on the Tuesday. So it was just so, everything was going great. And my parents, I was the first to get married. So they were planning the wedding. And my dad immediately started writing songs for the ceremony. He actually orchestrated the song that I walked down the aisle to, which is he was working on the day the accident happened, and so it was we were just all in a flutter and a buzz, and so excited, and then obviously so unexpected the accident on the afternoon of the 21st, and just immediately kind of thrown into this season of sadness and shock, and I'll never forget my brother. He didn't say much the weeks and months following the accident. But on the night of the accident, he looked right at me and said, just please don't change your wedding date. Because we had already planned. We had already set the date October 4th because of how my dad's touring schedule. And we knew it was only like one day in the fall was open. So we're like, well, that's the day we're getting married.
Yeah.
And I was like, of course not. Like, that's the day we've chosen. And so we moved forward, and our premarital counseling became this weird amalgamation of like sort of premarital counseling, sort of grief counseling, like what is happening in this session?
Right.
And to hold something so beautiful and something so sad in tension with each other, I felt at the time cheated of something, right? Like I felt, wait, it's supposed to be this way, and I always had this vision of what the girls would be like as flower girls, and just all these things that you spend years thinking of as a adolescent girl, and like, oh, when I get married, my dress will be like this, and I'll have these flowers, and the girls will be dressed in that, all that you have it planned in your mind, and then this earth-shattering thing happens that kind of changes it all. And so at the time I felt really gypped of something. But the more time that has passed, I think, I was sad. And could I go back in time and redo it all? Of course, I wish I could. I think everybody would say that, particularly of loss. I would never want to go back and choose this again for myself and my family. But it's what happened, and there's a sense of there's just something really sacred in it. This something so beautiful and something so terrible being right next to each other, that felt like prophetic in a sense for just the life that we're living and the life that we're expecting in the kingdom coming, that I feel in a way I was invited into something, like a secret almost, that I wish I could have discovered a different way.
Yeah.
But I nonetheless discovered it. And so, the wedding planning process was incredibly intense. We actually just celebrated our 8th anniversary last week and reached out to our wedding planner, and we're like, we don't know how you did it, but thank you so much. And she actually wrote this beautiful response back that just, she's like, I felt like, I was just entrusted with this beautiful time in your life and terrible time, but to watch you guys kind of walk through these decisions that mattered but didn't really matter in light of everything.
Yeah.
And the day of the wedding was a beautiful celebration, and I saw my parents laugh and dance and our family celebrate, and with everybody around us, you know, really, really get to kind of peek into heaven and something that my sister's already enjoying, the great, you know, wedding feast, and say, oh, this is just a little taste of what's coming, you know. And I think that was my biggest prayer, was that we would just be able to appropriately honor my sister on my wedding day, but be able to, you know, celebrate, and that my parents could really, you know, just enjoy, and me too. Obviously, I carried a weight of my sister not being there. And I think that we were able to do that in a beautiful way.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like it. I like what you said about just your wedding day being like a picture of what she was already experiencing, experiencing in heaven. That's really, gosh, that like gives me chills almost. It brings tears to my eyes. That's so beautiful.
It's almost like we felt like we were with her again in a weird way, right?
Yeah.
Like, because we had the goodbye was so tragic, you know, and like not what we were expecting. And then all of a sudden it's just done and over, and you're left reeling with the grief and sadness of it all, and just the new landscape in your heart and your home of the kind of new normal. And then to be able to have this festivity that felt kind of out of place in a sense, right? Because you're like still very much so in mourning. It was only 4 months, you know, after the accident that we got married, but yet it was almost like, you know, being reunited with her in a sense, because we got a little taste of what she's already experiencing. So I don't know. Yeah. It was like a gift.
Yeah. I think I have a small taste of that. Like, you know, a lot of times singing in church, there are songs that will have like, holy, holy, you know, is Lord God Almighty. And scripture says, you know, in heaven, that's what the angels are singing. And so sometimes like worshiping in church, I have this thought of like, what if my two children that are in heaven, what if we're singing the same words at the same time? Like, it's just this heaven meets earth kind of reality. Yeah, it's just, it's indescribable. And you wouldn't know it without, you know, you can't know that without the pain, you know? But, but yeah. So after you got married, did you move overseas right away?
We celebrated our first wedding anniversary overseas, so we moved, but we moved just right before then. So we were married like 10 months, and we moved to Belfast, Northern Ireland, and we were there for 3 years, studying at a small Bible college there.
And you wrote on your blog that it was a really just transformative time. So will you tell me like what you guys were doing there and what was going on? Like what made it so transformative and so great?
So we went in 2009 thinking we would just be there for a year. And then we would maybe transition onto the mission field for a while. We weren't exactly sure. We would come back home. Tanner and I are both working at the time for, he was working for his family business, which is a gymnastics facility. I'm working here at Show Hope, a nonprofit my parents started that does adoption advocacy and orphan care support work. And so we were both like heavily invested in family, not only seeing family and hanging out with family, being here in Franklin, but also working alongside family. So we felt like it would be really great for us to, at least early on in our marriage, sort of get outside of Nashville for at least a season. So we went to Belfast, knew of the Bible college through some mutual friends, and went there for what we thought was going to just be a year of kind of like biblical training, and then potentially onto the mission field. But when we got there, we just discovered just a beautiful community of believers, you know, looking for Jesus in the world and looking to live in community with each other and looking to share his gospel with others. And we just found it really, really beautiful. I think my heart was a little more at home in the Irish pace of life and culture. I felt like the best way to describe it is I felt like somebody sort of took the dial on the speed of life and just turned it down like just a couple notches. You know, it wasn't it didn't feel like, I didn't feel completely like removed from what life was like in America, but it just felt there was a little bit more space.
Okay.
And so there was more time for people and conversations for people. And, we were living at the college. And so a lot of our conversations were about, faith and how do we live faithful lives and bring others to know Jesus. And it just was really inspiring. We were able to be part of kind of like weekly prayer meetings and weekly times with a spiritual director for me that was just really informative. And our time in Ireland really kind of like, I hadn't been exposed in my kind of growing up in the church to like spiritual disciplines and these ideas of like spiritual practices of silence and solitude and just these things that were more in the fabric of the Christian culture in Ireland because of the, strong like Celtic Christianity and monastic tradition in Ireland. And so just to be exposed to that and this really like deep history behind the Christian faith was really inspiring for me, to know not only am I part of this worldwide family of believers, but there's a bunch that have come before us, and to know that and to access that was really exciting for Tanner and I. So it ended up being possible for us to stay 2 more years and Tanner to finish his undergrad degree.
Okay.
And I went ahead and did my master's in theology while we were there. Met some of the most meaningful people, some of the dearest friends I think that we'll have for life. Obviously, we're not living alongside them now because some have gone on to the mission field and some obviously stayed in Ireland, and we came back to Nashville, but we continue to stay in touch and have seen some of them since then, which has been so encouraging for Tanner and I. And, we didn't know when we finished Bible college, again, like I had alluded to earlier, we went thinking we would possibly go from Bible college on to the mission field, possibly to China to serve alongside Show Hope and some of the orphan care efforts there. But we got pregnant our final year of Bible college. Actually, we got pregnant at the end of our second year, and we had visas that expired, and we had to finish our school before our visas expired, or kind of all of our schoolwork would sort of be null and void.
Oh, wow.
And so we just went for it. I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to do my master's final year and have my first baby in the middle of it, but like I have to do it because like I'm already committed and we've got these visas and we got to finish.
Yeah,
and
you
so,
came that far. You just needed to finish it.
Yeah, I just needed to finish it. Our families were a little like, what are you doing? You're going to have a baby where?
Right.
And you're going to have our first grandbaby in Ireland? What are you talking about?
Oh, my goodness.
So they weren't so pleased at the beginning, but realized, it was important for us to finish school. So we had Eiley in November of 2011, so we were in our final year of school. And she was born then, and we moved home at the end of May. So she was like 6 months old when we moved back to the States. So, so she's got the Celtic fire deep in her bones, is what I tell her.
Do you feel like you carried some of that slow pace of life that you're talking about back home with you? Has that stayed with you at all?
I hope I have. It's hard, right? You feel like you're kind of fighting a machine a little bit. I hope I'm creating space in my life with my children and obviously my relationship with my husband. And I'm prayerful that other people feel that space when they're in contact with our family, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like there's room for stop by and drop in and say, hey, and I don't want visitors to feel rushed when they're at our house. I want there to be space for time when we have people over for dinner or whatnot. Little things that we try to do, we're not great at it, but, try not to have phones at the dinner table and try to make it, very clear with our children that we don't have phones or out and around when we have guests over. In fact, my daughter the other day, we had some friends stop by kind of unannounced, and I had run in and I checked my phone on something. I don't know. My husband was texting about if he needed to get anything from the grocery store. And she looked at me and goes, "Remember, Mom, we have company. It's a no phone zone." I'm like,
That's funny.
Sorry.
You're like, you're right.
Thanks.
You're right.
You caught me red-handed. So it's nothing like it's not like earth-shattering, like, oh, I have this revelation, we should do this, but just little rhythms, that try and create space. Even like, this is so funny, but like tea time in Ireland, like that sound, right? Like in the afternoon, everybody breaks and you have a cup of tea together. Like, that's awesome. Why aren't we doing more of that? Like, just stop and enjoy a cup of coffee or enjoy a conversation with someone, these little things. Yeah, just creating the space for conversation, with each other, and these little rhythms in our daily lives that cause us to pause in a way that sort of reorients ourselves to what truly matters and the kingdom coming, and all these things that we proclaim on Sunday, right? And I don't think I think we believe them really in our hearts, but these things in the Monday through Saturday that help kind of point us back to what we celebrate on the Sunday, and really finding those Sabbath kind of moments throughout our week. I think that is something that I sort of found and discovered and sort of put language to when we were in Ireland, that I'm really thankful for, that I was able to bring back. And not just the busyness of life, the pace of life for everybody is, frantic, it feels like, but also life as a mom and with 3 littles, and you're in the trenches of mothering, and life as a wife, and, involved in family business. And that's an interesting, dynamic, obviously, and all of that. So, I'm really thankful for our time in Ireland. And we something I will say is we had multiple mentors and people that spoke into our lives that really encouraged us to go to Ireland and to be there for a season. And I am really, really thankful for those people, because our parents were supportive of the first year, and they were supportive of the second and third year when they realized how transformative it was for us. But it felt really scary to us to make that decision, right? Like when we told our parents, like, we're going to stay for 2 more years, like not come back to the family businesses for a little bit longer, and not come back to Nashville, and obviously not expecting to have a baby, but, we're going to stay. That felt like a scary jump to take as, young 20s. And yet our parents totally embraced it once we went there, because they realized how impactful it was for us, that even that first year. But we had some people, Christian mentors speaking into our lives at that time that really encouraged us to take that leap of faith, and I'm really thankful for that.
Yeah, because at least they didn't have the same emotional attachment that your parents did. That may have colored their advice,
Right.
Yeah. So you had Eiley, and so you've been a mama for almost 5 years. What do you think, when you initially first became a mother, what was like the most shocking thing to your system, you think?
That I couldn't go to Starbucks by myself anymore and get a latte and not be interrupted.
Yeah.
I have to get somebody else out of the car just to go in to get my coffee. What?
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, all joking aside, no, seriously, the biggest shock to my system, 0 to 1 was the hardest for me, because I'm probably just really selfish. But I didn't know what to expect. I was one of the first kind of in my group of friends and families to have a baby. So, I didn't have many people ahead of me that kind of warned me like, hey, it's beautiful and amazing and awesome. And it's a lot, you know, it's just really kind of different. Yeah. Life would be different. And so I felt a little, I'll never forget crying. I mean, I think I was like in fetal position crying with my mom not long after the baby was born. She had come to Ireland to help, and I was like, no one told me how hard this was.
Yeah.
This is really hard. I'm trying. And like feeding didn't work well for us. She just would not latch. And I felt like such a failure, you know, all those things that mothers that we deal with. And I I had my plans and it was going to go this way. And from the get-go, it was not going that way. And it just felt like just the lies of the enemy were just like, boom, like, you can't do it. You don't know what you're doing. You're failing. You're going to mess it up. She's not gaining enough weight. Just right off the bat, you're like, what? So I think the biggest shock was, just it never stops. Like, your life you're focused on somebody, multiple buddies else, and there's so much beauty in that, but it is really hard. And I think realizing, like, Emily, you cannot do it on your own. Like, you need me now more than you ever have, because I'm gonna lose it if it's all up to me, right? So just trying to, like, keep reminding myself, like, no, you don't have what it takes to be a good mom, but you know somebody who has what it takes to help you be a good mom, you know?
Yeah, that sounds so similar to my first experience, and I wonder if it's similar because we're both oldest children. I don't know, but I think
that's so.
Yeah, I think the word that I used was relentless. Like, I didn't realize how relentless motherhood was, and also just like, I remember in the hospital. Like, I think I'll never forget this moment. I was in the hospital. I had just given birth not too long before, and it was I don't know, 1:30 or something. And the nurse came to take my son back to the nursery, and she said, do you want me to bring him back around 3:30 to try to feed again? And I remember thinking, but that means I don't get to sleep. Yeah. Like, oh, this baby needs to be fed, and it's only on me. Like, whoa, this is real. So, just that gravity is like, whew, no joke.
Yeah, just the simple, like, all the way from the simple things of, like, somebody telling you, like, babies need to be fed every 2 to 3 hours. Like, that's what feeding is going to be for the first, couple months. Like, I didn't know that before I became a mom. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, it's like, you feel this weight of, like, parenthood. Like, I have to protect and defend this thing, but then also just the practical, like, this is a lot to take on, and you're concerned. Like, when in your life have you been concerned about the color of somebody else's poop? And all of a sudden it's like, determines if you have a good day or a bad day. Like,
that's
what
so
is this?
Funny. That's so funny.
And you feel like you lose all, like, decency as a human when you're feeding, and you're like, what is this? I feel like, I'm just a machine. It just feels so, in a sense, like, you're just stripped all the way down to, like, oh my gosh, I can't do this on my own. Yes. And I think you, like, hit that breaking point of, like, okay, I need something bigger than myself. And I have an amazingly supportive husband. I can not even talk highly enough of just how beautifully he's walked with me into motherhood and, partnered alongside of me and helping with my girls. I'm really, really so thankful for him. I think that has been such a blessing, definitely.
Yeah. So as you look at your motherhood today, now you have 3 daughters. In some ways it gets easier, and in some ways, it adds more challenges. But what do you think, as you stand here today, what is your greatest challenge and your greatest joy in motherhood?
Oh, the greatest challenge and the greatest joy. That's a good question. Man, the greatest challenge in motherhood. Well, gosh, where do I start? I think there's this challenge. I think we spoke about it earlier, maybe when we were kind of meeting each other before we started recording, but this tension of, like, wanting my children to be, like, informed and, like, prepared for the world, but not, like,
not jaded.
Prematurely, like, not just jumping in and prematurely, like, exposing them to things that they don't need to know about yet. And like, finding that line as a parent and trying to live there, like, in not in fear. Like, that's really hard for me. Like, I just don't know how. Like, outside of the practical, I think the greatest challenge is, like, I'm really tired and really out of patience most of the time, like, practically. I'm like, please eat the food I just cooked for you. And I'm praying that I don't lose my cool right now because I'm so frustrated. I just cooked you dinner and you don't like it. And it's chicken. Like, it's not even, something crazy.
And you gobbled it all up last week. So what's, like, it's the same recipe.
Exactly. Oh my gosh. Like, talk about, you just, like, want to put your head through a wall. You're like, what? Last time you gobbled this all up. Exactly. Right. So I think practically, yeah, just I'm tired and I feel like at the end of my rope a lot. But I think if you scale back from that, I just don't know. I don't know how to strike that balance, and find myself, I'm staring at kindergarten next year, with my youngest, and wondering how do I, give her everything she needs, appropriately so, to be ready for kindergarten, and conversations she might hear and topics that might come up and all that kind of stuff, but in a way that's free and not full of fear.
Yeah.
And so there's that. Greatest joy, seeing my children smile and at peace is pretty much the best it gets. I love those moments where you see, your kids getting along, or we have a beautiful neighborhood. There's like 13 kids between like 3 or 4 houses, and they're all outside all the time playing with each other, which I feel like you don't find very often anymore in neighborhoods, but for some reason they're all running around our neighborhood, which is awesome. And when I see my children finding ways to be inclusive and be accepting in a way that shows our neighbors the love of Jesus, even if that's not like the words they're putting to it, but just little ways, that obviously, as you can imagine, makes a mama's heart happy and go, maybe they did see something good that, I don't know, maybe something I did say got through to their head, or that I did out of all the bad that's happened and the way I lose my patience and I can get frustrated and I fail, I'm praying that God's grace covers that, and I'm believing that it is, and maybe it is, You have those moments where you're like, maybe God's grace is really big enough for me, as oldest children. I think you wonder that a lot.
Yeah.
And it's actually big enough,
Yeah.
And when you see your kids walking in that, it kind of, your heart kind of does a leap, I think, of joy.
Yeah, it's almost like, it's like confirmation, like, thank you, Lord, for just like a little bit of a pat on the back. Thank you.
Yeah, exactly. And it's so funny how like little that pat can be, that you're like, oh, okay, I know I'm not going to do it perfect, and I'm not doing it perfect a lot of the time, but God's grace is sufficient. And I think I'm convinced, Sarah, we have to be, as mamas in this day and age, we have got to be women of prayer. It's like, I don't know what else I have, right? Like, what other tools do I have? I'll try my best to prepare them. I'll read. I'll look at other mom blogs and try to figure it out. Of course, I want to be the best resource for my kids that I can be, but we are living in some crazy times, and I'm more and more convinced I need to just really be but I really need to be in prayer for my children primarily, right? Like, they're God's first anyways, that whole, holding them with open hands. And if I can, position my heart to really be prayerful for them always and throughout the day, and as they are brought to my mind, and as we're in those tense moments and those happy moments, like all of it, I think that's the best service I can do for my children, right?
Pray for them and also model it for them, how to use in their life as well. Yeah, that's good. So this is the Heart Lessons podcast, Emily. So I like to ask all my guests who come on the show, as the Lord is, continuing to show his path to you, and as you're continuing to walk, in what he has for you, what would you say is a heart lesson that he keeps speaking to you to keep you going forward?
A heart lesson. I had a friend when we were in Ireland that shared a verse from Isaiah with me that says, in repentance and rest is your salvation, in quietness and trust is your strength. And gave me this kind of picture of the idea that, when you drop an anchor, you drop it down into still water, even though the sea on the surface might be, raging, and the storms, might have created big waves or whatever. But the water, is always calm underneath. You go so far underneath the surface, and there's a calm there. And this idea of kind of trying to drop the anchor of your soul into those calm waters, even though whatever, like, sick child or head lice from school or whatever the storm might be that's raging on the surface, there's this quietness. And to try and find that, it feels like so countercultural, what we were talking about earlier, finding that the just turning the dial back on time a little bit and just finding space to be present with one another. I think that is my heart lesson, and something I continue to carry with me in repentance and rest is your salvation. It seems like if we go, maybe we can secure our future for ourselves and our children. And what about maybe just stopping and resting in God's goodness and modeling that for our children, feels like something I continue to come back to. And so, as you put it, maybe is a heart lesson of sorts that I'm carrying with me through this journey.
Yeah, I love that. I guess I have one more question for you. You wrote on your blog that you're a visionary and a dreamer. So what are your big goals for Jesus? If you had,
Oh, my big goals for Jesus.
Yeah. What do you dream about at night?
What do I dream at night? Man, I have lots of big dreams. I'd love, on the adoption front, I feel like my mind is always running there. I'd love to see, we're specifically involved in China, and I'd love to see continued dialogue in China regarding in-country adoption and ways that we might help Chinese nationals adopt children from China, and just encouraging the conversation. It's already happening in China, which is exciting. And so just to be a part of that conversation, that's a huge dream, right? Like way big. I don't know how to be a part of it, but I'd love to be. So that's big on that front. I love to continue to see, just in my community here, conversations about ways to engage the Christian spiritual life in a way, like looking at spiritual disciplines in ways that, I don't know, like if that's a reading group with women, if it's I just don't know what that looks like. So trying to introduce things that were really meaningful and life-giving to me in my time in Ireland here in my little community in Franklin. So I've had lots of thoughts and ideas. What that, is that a prayer group? Is it a reading group? I don't know, kind of thinking through that. And then also in terms of my children, I'd love to, write some material maybe someday on just bringing them into these thoughts on how do you create room for silence even in children, in that practice, and like the practice, what does it mean to listen for God? We want to teach our children how to pray, right? Yeah. What about listening? Like we want our children to be good listeners, and that's a hard thing to teach them anyways, but how do we create that for our kids? And so looking at, kind of dreaming about that and talking with other mamas here that are thinking on similar things. So I don't know what that looks like. They're all kind of dreams that are up in the air, but who knows? I trust God has them all.
Yeah. Well, that's wonderful. I love hearing that, and I hope that maybe someday, maybe in 10 years, you can look back and see that some of those have actually come to pass. That would be great. Wow. I would be really honored and humbled, I think, if in 10 years I can look back and go, oh my goodness, wow, look what God did. That's crazy. That'd be awesome. Isn't he so gracious in doing that with us, though, bringing these little, popping these little reminders in our head, like, hey, one time you said this and it happened, and I'm just reminding you. Yeah, so. It's great. It's crazy, and like you said, humbling to be a part of, wow, you used me, wow, who am I? But that's awesome. Well, Emily, this has been such a great conversation, and I have loved chatting with you, and I'm so excited for my listeners to hear your story and all your great perspectives on life. So thank you for sharing with me this afternoon and taking the time to talk with me. Of course, Sarah. Thank you so much for having me as a guest. I loved chatting with Emily. I thought, actually I told my husband when I was done recording, I was like, I think if we weren't a time zone away, we probably would get together and have play dates with our kids and that sort of thing. So I just felt like we just had a connection on, we're kind of in the same phase of life. And it was just really fun to chat with her and hear more about her story. I would love to hear what your favorite part of this episode was. I know I took away a lot of great things. I think maybe one big part was about building in space for quiet and rest. And I tend to not do that very well. I don't know if you're in that boat with me, but that was a challenge for me to just think about how I can, I guess, also just incorporate quietness and connection with other people in my day, because I am just not good at that. I get on a track of my to-do list, and before I know it, it's, too late. And so, yeah, I'm going to be working on that. Maybe you need to work on that too. I don't know. Maybe you connected with what we were both talking about, just sort of, I don't want to use the word commiserating. It wasn't miserable, but the adjustments of being a first-time mom, that was huge. I remember that for me, and it was just funny to hear, almost like I felt like I could have been saying the exact same words that she was saying. So maybe you identified with that. Or maybe there was some other part of this episode that you loved. I would love to hear about it. You can let me know on Instagram. You can email me on Facebook. You can also, post something on my page. I would just love to know how this episode touched you and what you keep, kind of thinking about as you think back over listening. Thank you again to Emily for taking the time to chat with me and record that episode and share her heart. I really appreciate that. I don't take it lightly that people take time out of their day, to talk with me. So that's just a big thank you to her. And I thank you all for listening, and I hope this episode was a blessing to you. And as always, I hope you were able to come away with a heart lesson of your own to help you draw closer to the Lord. Bye, guys.